The stagecoach rattled into Benton, Arkansas just as the August sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the dusty main street in shades of amber and gold. And inside sat a woman whose hands trembled not from the rough journey, but from the weight of secrets she carried like stones in her chest. Hannah Catherine Winters pressed her gloved fingers against the worn leather seat and watched through the window as unfamiliar faces turned to stare at the arriving coach. She was 28 years old, though the advertisement she had answered specified a preference for brides under 25. The lie of omission sat heavy on her conscience, but desperation made liars of even honest women. Her father's debts had consumed everything after his death 6 months prior, leaving her with nothing but a trunk of modest belongings and a choice between the workhouse or answering an advertisement for a mail-order bride in Arkansas. The coach lurched to a stop, and Hannah drew a steadying breath. The door swung open, revealing a gangly young man with eager eyes who couldn't have been more than 22 or 23. He wore clean denim and a crisp shirt that suggested he had dressed with great care for this occasion. His face was open and honest, tanned from long hours under the sun, with sandy hair that stuck up slightly despite obvious attempts to tame it with pomade. "Miss Winters." His voice cracked slightly with nervousness, and he cleared his throat. "I'm Zachary Zimmerman. Welcome to Benton." Hannah accepted his offered hand and stepped down from the coach, acutely aware of the way his eyes widened as he took in her appearance. She knew what he saw. A woman in a sensible gray traveling dress with laugh lines at the corners of her eyes, not the fresh-faced girl he had likely imagined during the 3 months of correspondence. "Mr. Zimmerman." She kept her voice steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Thank you for meeting me. I've got the wagon just over here." He gestured toward a sturdy buckboard hitched to 2 draft horses. "The ranch is about 5 miles out. We should get there before full dark." As he retrieved her trunk from the coach, Hannah noticed the way other townspeople watched them with undisguised curiosity. A woman in a blue bonnet whispered to her companion, and 2 men outside the general store exchanged knowing looks. Small towns thrived on gossip, and the arrival of a mail-order bride would fuel conversations for weeks. Zachary loaded her trunk with easy strength despite his lean build, then helped her onto the wagon seat. He climbed up beside her and took the reins, clicking his tongue to set the horses moving. They rolled out of town in awkward silence, the only sounds the creaking of wheels and the steady clip-clop of hooves on packed earth. The landscape opened up around them as they left Benton behind. Rolling hills covered in pine and oak stretched in every direction, with occasional clearings where cattle grazed in the golden evening light. The Ouachita Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks soft blue against the sky. It was beautiful country, wild and untamed in a way that made Hannah's Boston upbringing feel very far away indeed. "It's lovely," she said, breaking the silence that had grown increasingly uncomfortable. "The land, I mean, very different from Massachusetts." "Yes, madam." Zachary kept his eyes on the road ahead. "Gets hot as blazes in summer, but the springs and falls are real pretty. Winters are mild mostly. We don't get much snow." Another silence fell. Hannah could feel the tension radiating from the young man beside her, could see the way his jaw worked as if he were chewing over words he couldn't quite speak. She had known this moment would come, had rehearsed various speeches during the long journey south, but none of them seemed adequate now. "Mr. Zimmerman," she began, then paused. "Zachary, there's something I need to tell you." He glanced at her briefly, then back at the road. "Yes, madam." Hannah straightened her spine, calling on the same courage that had allowed her to board that stagecoach in Boston 3 weeks ago. "I'm older than you expected." The words hung in the air between them. Zachary's hands tightened on the reins, and for a long moment he said nothing. Hannah's stomach twisted with dread. He would turn the wagon around. He would send her back to town, to the boarding house if she was lucky, to sleep on the street if she was not. She would have nowhere to go, no money for passage back east, nothing. Then Zachary turned to look at her fully, and to her surprise, he was smiling. It transformed his whole face, crinkling the corners of his eyes and revealing straight white teeth. There was warmth in that smile and something else. Relief, perhaps. "Then you're wiser than I hoped," he said simply. Hannah felt something inside her chest unfurl, like a flower opening to unexpected sunlight. "You're not angry. I should have told you in my letters. I know the advertisement specified younger women. My mother wrote that advertisement." Zachary shook his head ruefully. "Before she passed last year, she had specific ideas about what I needed. But I'm the one who's got to live with my wife, not fulfill Ma's expectations from beyond the grave." "I'm 28, Hannah said, wanting everything honest between them now. "Nearly 29. "If that changes things, I understand. I can find work in town, save enough for passage back to Boston." "And go back to what?" The question was gentle, not prying, but Hannah found herself answering anyway. "Nothing. There's nothing left there. My father died of pneumonia in February. He had debts I didn't know about. The creditors took everything. The house, the furniture, even my mother's jewelry." She looked down at her gloved hands. "I was a seamstress, but the wages aren't enough to live on alone, and the boarding houses won't take single women without references." "I had nowhere else to turn." Zachary nodded slowly. "My pa died 5 years back, thrown from a horse. Ma followed last year, pneumonia like your father. Left me with 3,000 acres of good grazing land, 200 head of cattle, and nobody to share it with. I'm 23 years old, Miss Winters, and I've been running this ranch alone for a year now. I need a partner, not a child bride who'll need raising alongside the livestock." The frankness of his words surprised a laugh out of Hannah. It was her first genuine laugh in months, and it felt strange and wonderful at the same time. Zachary grinned at the sound, and some of the tension dissolved from the air between them. "I can cook and clean," Hannah offered. "I'm good with a needle, obviously, being a seamstress. I can do basic doctoring. I helped nurse my father through his illness, though it didn't save him in the end. I can read and write and do figures. I don't know anything about cattle or ranching, but I'm willing to learn." "That's more than I could have hoped for." Zachary guided the horses around a bend in the road, and a structure came into view in the distance. "There it is, the Zimmerman Ranch, your new home if you'll have it." The house was a solid 2-story structure built of local timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. It wasn't grand, but it looked well maintained, with glass windows and a stone chimney. A barn stood behind it, along with several smaller outbuildings. Fences crisscrossed the visible acreage, dividing pastures where cattle grazed in the gathering dusk. As they drew closer, Hannah could see more details. Flower boxes under the windows, though the plants in them had died from neglect. A rocking chair on the porch, motionless. Curtains in the windows that hung slightly crooked. The signs of a house without a woman's touch, but not a house beyond redemption. Zachary pulled the wagon up to the front porch and set the brake. He jumped down, then came around to help Hannah descend. His hands at her waist were gentle and impersonal, steadying her as she found her footing on solid ground after hours of jostling. "I should warn you," he said, not releasing her immediately. "The inside's a bit of a mess. I keep it clean enough, but it doesn't look like it did when Ma was alive." "And the bedroom situation." He paused, color rising in his cheeks. "I've set up the spare room for you. I know we're meant to be married proper soon, but I figured you'd want time to settle in first. Get to know each other a bit before we make things official." Hannah felt a rush of gratitude for this young man's consideration. She had been dreading this moment, wondering if he would expect immediate consummation of their arrangement. The fact that he offered her time and space spoke well of his character. "That's very thoughtful," she said. "And practical. We are strangers, after all, despite our correspondence." "Exactly." Zachary looked relieved that she understood. He released her waist and gestured toward the house. "Come on, I'll show you around before the light fails completely." The interior of the house exceeded Hannah's expectations. The front door opened into a spacious main room that served as both sitting area and dining space. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, with comfortable-looking chairs arranged before it. The furniture was simple but well-made, built to last rather than to impress. A staircase against the far wall led to the second floor. To the left, a doorway opened into a kitchen that made Hannah's heart sing. A modern cast-iron stove stood against one wall, with a good work table in the center and shelves lined with dishes and cooking implements. A hand pump at the sink meant water didn't need to be hauled from outside, a luxury she hadn't expected. "The well's just outside the kitchen door," Zachary explained, following her gaze. "Pa had it dug deep, never goes dry even in summer, and there's a root cellar beneath the kitchen for storage." He showed her the rest of the downstairs, a small study lined with books that had clearly belonged to his parents, and a washroom that was surprisingly modern for a rural Arkansas ranch. Then they climbed the stairs to the second floor. 4 bedrooms opened off the upstairs hallway. Zachary's room was at the front of the house, spartanly furnished with a bed, wardrobe, and washstand. The other 3 rooms showed signs of disuse, though they were clean enough. He led her to the room at the back corner, which had windows on 2 walls offering views of the ranch lands beyond. "This was Ma's sewing room," he said. "I brought in a bed and dresser for you. The wardrobe's empty, ready for your things. There's linens in the chest at the foot of the bed and extra blankets if you need them." Hannah walked to the window and looked out at the darkening landscape. The first stars were appearing in the violet sky, and lamplight glowed from distant ranch houses scattered across the valley. It was so different from Boston, from the cramped rooms and constant noise and press of humanity. Here, there was space and silence and the possibility of a future she hadn't dared imagine a month ago. "It's perfect," she said quietly. "Thank you, Zachary." "You're welcome, Hannah." He said her name carefully, as if testing the weight of it on his tongue. "I'll bring your trunk up, then get started on supper. You must be hungry after traveling all day." "Let me cook," Hannah said quickly. "Please, I'd like to feel useful, and I'm sure you have evening chores to tend to." Zachary looked like he wanted to protest, but something in her expression must have convinced him. He nodded. "All right. There's bacon and eggs in the cold box, bread in the bin. Make yourself at home. I'll be in from the barn in about an hour." After he left, Hannah stood in the center of her new room and let out a long, shaky breath. She had done it. She had traveled halfway across the country to marry a stranger, and by some miracle, that stranger had turned out to be kind. Young, yes, and clearly inexperienced in ways beyond ranching, but decent. Honest. Those qualities were worth more than sophistication or polish. She unpacked quickly, hanging her few dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her personal items on the dresser. The familiarity of the task soothed her nerves. Then she headed downstairs to explore the kitchen properly and prepare their first meal together. The kitchen was better stocked than she had expected. Zachary might not be a skilled cook, but he clearly understood the importance of maintaining supplies. She found everything she needed for a solid supper and set to work, falling into the comfortable rhythm of meal preparation. By the time Zachary returned from the barn, she had bacon sizzling in the pan, eggs ready to fry, and fresh biscuits warming in the oven. She had also found coffee and set a pot to brewing, its rich aroma filling the kitchen. Zachary stopped in the doorway, a look of pure wonder on his face. "It smells like home," he said softly. "Like it used to when Ma was alive." They ate at the kitchen table, the conversation flowing more easily now that the initial awkwardness had passed. Zachary told her about the ranch, about his plans to expand the herd and improve the breeding stock. He spoke with passion about the land, about the satisfaction of building something lasting, and Hannah found herself caught up in his enthusiasm. She told him about Boston, about growing up as the only child of a bookkeeper and a schoolteacher, about learning to sew from her grandmother and working in a dress shop before going out on her own. She didn't mention the humiliation of having to beg for work after her father's death, or the landlord who had suggested an alternative arrangement when she couldn't make rent. Some things were too raw to speak of yet. After supper, Zachary helped her wash the dishes, an action so unexpected that Hannah nearly dropped the plate she was holding. In her experience, men considered kitchen work beneath them. "Ma always said that folks who eat together should clean together," Zachary explained, taking the dried plate from her hands and stacking it on the shelf. "Besides, it's faster with two." When the kitchen was clean, they sat on the front porch in the cool evening air. The stars were brilliant overhead, undimmed by city lights. Crickets sang in the grass, and somewhere in the distance, a cow lowed softly. "I want to be honest with you," Zachary said, breaking the comfortable silence. "About expectations and such, I need a wife, that's true enough. Someone to help run this place, to build a life with. But I don't want you to feel trapped or forced into anything. If you want to leave, if this isn't what you hoped for, I'll take you back to town and pay your passage wherever you want to go." Hannah turned to look at him. In the lamplight spilling from the windows, his young face looked serious and earnest. "And if I stay, then we take our time, get to know each other proper. When we're both ready, we'll go into town and have Reverend Mitchell marry us legal. And after that, well, we'll figure things out as we go." "That sounds fair," Hannah said, "and sensible. Though I should tell you now, I don't intend to leave. I meant what I said earlier. There's nothing for me back east. This is my chance at a new life, and I'm not fool enough to throw it away." Zachary smiled, that same warm expression that had eased her worries earlier. "Then I guess we're in this together." They sat in companionable silence for a while longer, until Hannah's eyelids began to droop with exhaustion. Zachary noticed and stood, offering his hand to help her up. "Go on to bed," he said gently. "You've had a long day. Sleep as late as you need tomorrow. The ranch will still be here when you wake." Hannah climbed the stairs to her room, undressed down to her shift, and crawled between clean sheets that smelled of sunshine and fresh air. Despite her exhaustion, sleep didn't come immediately. Her mind kept turning over the events of the day, the unexpected kindness of the young rancher who had agreed to marry her, the beauty of this wild Arkansas landscape, the fragile hope beginning to take root in her chest. She had expected to feel like a commodity, purchased and paid for. Instead, she felt like a woman being given a second chance at life. It was a gift she intended to treasure. The next morning, Hannah woke to brilliant sunshine streaming through her windows and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. She dressed quickly in a simple calico work dress and braided her dark hair into a practical coil at the nape of her neck. When she descended to the kitchen, she found Zachary already gone, a note left on the table beside a still warm cup of coffee. "Gone to check the south pasture fence. Back by noon. Help yourself to anything you need." Hannah smiled at the simple message and set about exploring her new domain more thoroughly. The pantry revealed a good stock of staples, but a lack of variety that suggested Zachary had been eating the same simple meals for months. The root cellar held potatoes, onions, and apples, but no preserves or pickles. None of the put-up goods that should have filled those shelves. She spent the morning taking inventory and making lists, planning meals that would use what they had while noting what should be purchased or grown. The garden plot behind the house was overrun with weeds, but the soil looked good. It was too late in the season to plant much, but she could prepare it for spring. Zachary returned precisely at noon, as promised, leading his horse and looking hot and dusty. Hannah had lunch ready, cold chicken and fresh bread with the last of the apples sliced and arranged on a plate. "You didn't have to do all this," he said, washing his hands at the pump before sitting down. "I wanted to," Hannah replied honestly. "It feels good to be useful." Over the next week, they fell into a comfortable routine. Zachary rose before dawn to tend the livestock and work the ranch. Hannah managed the house, cooking proper meals and bringing order to rooms that had suffered from benign neglect. In the evenings, they sat together on the porch or in the sitting room, talking about their days, their pasts, their hopes for the future. Hannah learned that Zachary had been educated by his mother, who had been a teacher before her marriage. He could quote Shakespeare and discuss philosophy with equal ease to planning cattle drives and predicting weather patterns. He was lonely, she realized, in ways that went beyond needing a wife. He missed intellectual companionship, someone to share ideas with over supper. Zachary learned that Hannah had a quick wit and a talent for seeing the humor in difficult situations. She could discuss books he had read and introduce him to ones he hadn't. She asked intelligent questions about ranching and listened attentively to his explanations, genuinely interested in understanding his work. On the 8th day after her arrival, Zachary asked if she would like to ride out with him to see more of the ranch. Hannah admitted she had never learned to ride properly, having no cause for it in Boston. Zachary's eyes lit up with the prospect of teaching her. He saddled a gentle mare named Daisy and spent the afternoon teaching Hannah the basics of horsemanship. She proved a quick study, though she ached in muscles she hadn't known existed. They rode through pastures dotted with cattle bearing the Zimmerman brand, a stylized ZZ that Zachary's grandfather had designed when he first claimed this land in 1845. "Grandpa came from Tennessee," Zachary explained as they paused at the top of a hill overlooking the valley. "He fought in the Mexican War, used his land grant to start this ranch, built it from nothing into something that could support a family. Pa expanded it, and now it's my turn to leave it better than I found it." "It must feel good," Hannah said, shading her eyes against the bright September sun. "Having roots that go so deep, knowing exactly where you belong. Don't you feel that way about Boston?" Hannah shook her head. "I felt that way about my family home, but that's gone now. Boston was just the city where I happened to live. I never really belonged there, not in any meaningful way. I was always too bookish for the society ladies and too proud to settle for the kind of men who wanted seamstresses for wives." "What kind of men were those?" "The kind who wanted someone to cook and clean and warm their beds, but never to have opinions or ideas of their own. Who saw a wife as a servant they didn't have to pay." She glanced at him. "I worried you might be that kind of man. And now I think you're the kind of man who sees a wife as a partner, which is what I hoped to find when I answered your advertisement." They rode back to the ranch house as the sun began its descent, and Hannah felt something shift between them. The careful politeness was giving way to genuine friendship, and beneath that, the first stirrings of something deeper. She caught herself watching the way sunlight caught in Zachary's sandy hair, the strength in his hands as he handled the reins, the kindness in his eyes when he looked at her. That evening, after supper, Zachary cleared his throat nervously. "I was thinking, if you're agreeable, we might go into town on Saturday, introduce you properly to folks, pick up supplies, and maybe talk to Reverend Mitchell." Hannah's heart quickened. "About marriage." "About marriage," Zachary confirmed. "If you're ready. I'm not trying to rush you, but I'd like to make things official. Give you legal claim to this place, make sure you're protected if anything happens to me." "Nothing's going to happen to you," Hannah said quickly, then caught herself. "But yes. I'm ready. I'd like that very much." Saturday dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for the 5-mile ride into Benton. Hannah wore her best dress, a deep blue muslin she had made herself, and Zachary looked almost formal in a pressed white shirt and string tie. They took the wagon, arriving in town mid-morning when the streets were busy with weekend shoppers. People stared, as Hannah had known they would. The arrival of the mail-order bride had been big news, and everyone wanted a look at the woman who had captured young Zimmerman's attention. Hannah kept her head high and her hand on Zachary's arm as he helped her down from the wagon. Their first stop was the general store, where they needed to stock up on supplies. The proprietor, a round man with spectacles named Mr. Fletcher, greeted them effusively. "Mrs. Zimmerman, I presume?" He beamed at Hannah. "Not yet," Zachary corrected gently. "Miss Winters, but hopefully soon." Mr. Fletcher's wife appeared from the back of the store, a plump woman with sharp eyes that took in every detail of Hannah's appearance. "How lovely to meet you, dear. You must tell me all about Boston. We so rarely get anyone from the East." As Zachary gathered supplies, Mrs. Fletcher peppered Hannah with questions, some innocent and some clearly designed to extract gossip. Hannah answered the innocent ones honestly and deflected the prying ones with practiced ease, a skill she had learned during her years as a seamstress dealing with society ladies. While they shopped, a woman about Hannah's age approached them. She had kind eyes and a warm smile, and she introduced herself as Mary Patterson, wife of the local doctor. "I wanted to welcome you to Benton properly," Mary said, "and to apologize for the curiosity. We're a small town, and new arrivals cause quite a stir. But most folks here are good people once you get to know them." Hannah warmed to her immediately. "Thank you. That's very kind. If you need anything or just want another woman to talk to, our house is the white one with the green shutters on Elm Street. Please, come visit anytime." The kindness in Mary's voice brought unexpected tears to Hannah's eyes. She blinked them back quickly, but not before Mary noticed. The older woman squeezed her hand in understanding, a gesture that said more than words could. After finishing at the general store, Zachary and Hannah walked to the white church at the end of Main Street. Reverend Mitchell was in his study, a scholarly-looking man with silver hair and a gentle demeanor. "Zachary, my boy," he said, clasping the younger man's hand warmly. "And this must be Miss Winters. Welcome to Benton." They sat in his office and Zachary explained their situation. The Reverend listened carefully, nodding occasionally, his expression thoughtful. "You understand this is a serious commitment," he said finally. "Not to be entered into lightly, even under unusual circumstances. Marriage is a sacred bond, meant to last until death." "I understand," Zachary said firmly. "I wouldn't have asked Hannah to come all this way if I wasn't serious about building a life together. And you, Miss Winters." The Reverend turned his kind gaze on Hannah. "You're comfortable with this arrangement. You feel no coercion or undue pressure." Hannah met his eyes steadily. "I came here of my own free will, Reverend. Zachary has been nothing but kind and respectful. I believe we can build a good marriage together. Then I'd be honored to perform the ceremony." When would you like to marry? Zachary glanced at Hannah. 2 weeks from now. That gives us time to get everything in order and for Hannah to be certain this is what she wants. October 4th, the Reverend said, making a note in his ledger. Perfect. Will you want a small ceremony here in the church or something more private? The church, Hannah said, surprising herself. If that's all right, I'd like to do this properly. They left the church with the date set, and Hannah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness fluttering in her stomach. In 2 weeks, she would be married. She would be Hannah Zimmerman, a rancher's wife in Arkansas, as far from her Boston upbringing as it was possible to get. As they walked back to the wagon, a commotion near the saloon caught their attention. A group of men had gathered, their voices raised in argument. Zachary's jaw tightened, and he tried to steer Hannah past, but she had already seen the cause of the disturbance. 2 cowboys were shoving a third man, smaller and darker-skinned, who was trying to back away peacefully. Their words carried clearly in the afternoon air, ugly epithets that made Hannah's blood boil. "Zachary," she said quietly, "shouldn't someone stop them?" "It's not our business," Zachary said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe his own words. "Come on, let's get to the wagon." But Hannah had already seen the sheriff standing nearby, watching the confrontation with folded arms and making no move to intervene. Something inside her snapped, the same stubborn courage that had brought her to Arkansas in the first place. She marched toward the group, ignoring Zachary's startled protest. "Excuse me, gentlemen. Is there a problem here?" The men turned to stare at her, clearly surprised that a respectable woman would involve herself in their business. The man being harassed took advantage of their distraction to put more distance between himself and his tormentors. "No problem, madam," one of the cowboys said, his tone just shy of mocking. "Just teaching this boy where he belongs." "I see." Hannah's voice could have frozen water in July. "And where exactly does he belong?" "Last I checked, this was a public street where any law-abiding citizen could walk freely." "Hannah," Zachary appeared at her elbow, his voice tight. "Let's go." But the man who had been harassed was looking at her with an expression of mingled surprise and gratitude. "Thank you, madam," he said quietly. He was young, perhaps 20, with the weathered skin of someone who worked outdoors. "I was just passing through, meant no offense." "No offense was given," Hannah said firmly. She turned to the cowboys. "Good day, gentlemen." The word dripped with irony. She let Zachary lead her back to the wagon, aware of the stares following them. When they were safely seated and the horses were pulling away from town, Zachary let out a long breath. "That was brave," he said, "and foolish. Those men could have turned on you, perhaps. But it was the right thing to do." Hannah smoothed her skirts. "That poor man wasn't doing anything wrong. I couldn't just walk past." "No," Zachary said slowly, "I don't suppose you could. It's one of the things I'm learning about you. You've got steel in your spine." "I've had to develop it," Hannah replied. "The world isn't kind to women alone. You learn to stand up for yourself or you get trampled." They rode in silence for a while, then Zachary said, "You're right, of course, about speaking up. I should have done it myself, instead of trying to avoid trouble. Pa always said that good men who stay silent are just as guilty as bad men who act." "We both stood up," Hannah pointed out. "That's what matters." The incident stayed with Hannah as they returned to the ranch. She had seen prejudice in Boston, of course, directed at the Irish immigrants and freed slaves who had made their way north. But she had never witnessed such casual cruelty or seen a lawman refuse to intervene. It troubled her, this ugliness beneath the beautiful landscape. That evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the stars emerge, Hannah broached the subject. "Is it always like that? In town?" Zachary didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Sometimes. Not everyone, but enough. The war ended 20 years ago, but old hatreds die hard. Some folks can't let go of the past, can't accept that the world has changed. Did your family own slaves? The question was delicate, but Hannah needed to know. No, Grandpa was against it on principle, and Pa followed his lead. We've always worked our own land, hired help when we needed it, and paid fair wages. Ma was from Ohio originally, brought her abolitionist views with her when she married Pa. They faced plenty of criticism for their stance during the war years. That must have been difficult. It was. Ma said they lost friends over it, people they'd known for years. But she also said that standing for what's right is more important than being popular. I believe that too. Hannah reached over and took his hand, the first time she had initiated physical contact between them. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. "I'm glad," she said softly. "I'm glad you're that kind of man." The 2 weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of activity. Hannah threw herself into preparing for the ceremony and the celebration that would follow. She sewed herself a new dress, cream-colored silk that she had purchased from Mrs. Fletcher's surprisingly well-stocked fabric selection. Mary Patterson visited twice, bringing gifts and advice, and quickly becoming the friend Hannah hadn't realized she desperately needed. Zachary worked on the ranch with renewed energy, making repairs he had been putting off and ensuring everything was in perfect order. In the evenings, he taught Hannah more about riding, and she proved an apt student, gaining confidence with each lesson. They talked about everything during those 2 weeks, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Hannah confessed her worry that she might not be able to bear children, that at nearly 29 her chance might have passed. Zachary admitted his fear that he would fail as a husband, that he was too young and inexperienced to be what she needed. "We'll figure it out together," became their repeated refrain, a promise and a comfort. The night before the wedding, Mary Patterson invited Hannah to stay at her house, observing the tradition that bride and groom shouldn't see each other before the ceremony. Hannah accepted, though she found herself strangely reluctant to leave the ranch house that had become home so quickly. Lying in Mary's guest bed, Hannah stared at the ceiling and wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. Tomorrow, she would bind herself legally to a man she had known less than a month, a man 5 years her junior, in a place far from everything familiar. It was madness when she thought about it logically, but her heart, that foolish organ, whispered something different. It whispered that Zachary Zimmerman was good and kind and honest, that he saw her as a person, not a possession. That the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her was the beginning of something real and lasting. She fell asleep still uncertain, but determined to trust in the choice she had made. The morning of October 4th dawned perfect and clear, with just enough autumn crispness in the air to be refreshing. Mary helped Hannah dress, fixing her hair in an elegant style that softened her features and made her look younger than her years. "You're beautiful," Mary said, meeting Hannah's eyes in the mirror. "Zachary won't be able to breathe when he sees you." The church was fuller than Hannah had expected. Word of the wedding had spread and curiosity had brought out most of the town. She saw Mr. and Mrs. Fletcher, the doctor and his children, farmers and ranchers from the surrounding area, and even the young man she had defended on the street 2 weeks ago, standing quietly at the back. But she only had eyes for Zachary, waiting at the altar in a new suit that made him look older and somehow more solid. His face when he saw her walking down the aisle was everything Mary had predicted. Wonder and joy and something deeper, something that made Hannah's breath catch in her throat. Reverend Mitchell performed the ceremony with simple dignity. Hannah and Zachary spoke their vows in clear voices, promising to honor and cherish each other for as long as they both lived. When Zachary slipped the ring on her finger, a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother, Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. "You may kiss your bride," the Reverend said with a smile. Zachary cupped Hannah's face gently in his hands and kissed her softly, sweetly. A kiss full of promise and new beginnings. The congregation applauded, and Hannah felt joy bubble up inside her chest like champagne. They held the reception at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food contributed by neighbors who wanted to welcome the new bride properly. There was music and dancing, laughter and celebration. Hannah found herself swept from partner to partner, as the men of Benton took turns dancing with the new Mrs. Zimmerman, while their wives chatted with Zachary and offered advice on married life. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, the guests began to take their leave. Mary hugged Hannah tightly, whispering, "Be happy," before climbing into her husband's buggy. One by one, the wagons and horses departed, until Hannah and Zachary stood alone in the yard of their ranch house, husband and wife at last. The house felt different when they entered it together that night. The same rooms, the same furniture, but everything had shifted into new significance. This was their home now, legally and truly. Hannah climbed the stairs to her room to pack her things, to move them to the master bedroom she would now share with her husband. Zachary followed her, leaning in the doorway as she began folding her dresses. "We don't have to rush anything," he said quietly. "If you need more time." Hannah turned to face him, this young man who had shown her such patience and kindness. "I don't need more time. I'm your wife, Zachary. I want to be your wife in every way that matters." He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. This kiss was different from the chaste one in the church. It was deeper, more urgent, full of the attraction that had been building between them for weeks. Hannah melted into him, letting herself feel the desire she had been carefully holding in check. They made love that night with a tenderness that surprised them both. Zachary was gentle and patient, and Hannah found herself responding with a passion she hadn't known she possessed. Afterward, lying tangled together in the big bed that had once belonged to his parents, Hannah felt a sense of rightness settle over her like a warm blanket. "I love you," Zachary whispered into her hair. "I don't know if it's too soon to say that, but it's true. I love you, Hannah." Hannah's throat tightened with emotion. "I love you too. I didn't expect to, not this quickly, but I do." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, 2 people who had started as strangers and become something infinitely more precious. The weeks that followed were a period of adjustment and discovery. Hannah learned the rhythms of ranch life, the endless cycle of work that defined their days. She learned to recognize the different cattle by their markings, to predict weather by the behavior of the animals, to ride with confidence across the rolling Arkansas hills. Zachary learned his wife's moods and needs, the way she hummed while cooking, how she liked to read for an hour before bed, the particular way she smiled when she was truly happy. He learned that beneath her proper Boston manners lived a woman of fierce passion and stubborn determination, and he loved her all the more for it. In November, they made another trip to town for supplies. The stares had lessened somewhat, though Hannah still attracted curious glances as the new bride who had come from so far away. They were leaving the general store, packages loaded in the wagon, when they encountered the young man Hannah had defended on her first visit to Benton. He touched his hat respectfully. "Mrs. Zimmerman, Mr. Zimmerman, I wanted to thank you again for your kindness that day." "It was nothing," Hannah said warmly. "Are you still in the area?" "Yes, madam. I got hired on at the Patterson Ranch working with their horses. Steady work, fair wages." "It's a good situation." "I'm glad to hear it," Zachary said, offering his hand. The young man shook it, surprise clear on his face at the gesture of respect. As they drove home, Hannah asked, "Do you think we could use extra help around the ranch in the spring when the work picks up?" Zachary glanced at her. "Are you thinking of offering that young man a job? If he's good with horses, he might be useful, and he seems hardworking." "We could use the help," Zachary admitted. "Been thinking about hiring someone for a while now. The ranch is getting too big for one man to handle alone. Then we'll speak to Dr. Patterson about him, get a reference." December brought cold rains and preparations for Christmas. Hannah threw herself into decorating the house, determined to create the kind of warm, festive atmosphere she remembered from her childhood. She baked cookies and pies, made wreaths from pine boughs, and convinced Zachary to cut down a small cedar tree to set up in the parlor. On Christmas Eve, they attended services at the church, then returned home to exchange gifts. Hannah had spent weeks making Zachary a new shirt from fabric she had painstakingly embroidered with a pattern of leaves and vines. He had commissioned a cameo brooch from a jeweler in Little Rock with her profile carefully carved into ivory. "It's beautiful," Hannah breathed, touching the delicate piece. "But you shouldn't have spent so much." "You're worth it," Zachary said simply. "You're worth everything." They made love in front of the fireplace that night, the glow of the flames painting their skin in shades of gold and amber. Hannah had never felt so cherished, so completely loved and desired. The lonely seamstress from Boston seemed like a different person, a character from someone else's story. January brought a cold snap unusual for Arkansas, with frost covering the ground and ice forming on the water troughs. Hannah woke one morning feeling queasy, a sensation that persisted through breakfast and into the afternoon. She tried to dismiss it as something she ate, but when the nausea returned the next morning and the next, she began to suspect. Mary Patterson confirmed her suspicions when Hannah visited her in town a week later. "You're pregnant, my dear. Congratulations." Hannah sat in Mary's kitchen, a cup of tea cooling between her hands, trying to process the news. A baby. She was going to have a baby. At 29, when she had almost given up hope of ever being a mother. "Are you all right?" Mary asked gently. "You've gone pale." "I'm fine. I'm wonderful." "I'm terrified." Hannah laughed shakily. "I don't know what I am. That's perfectly normal. Wait until you tell Zachary. He'll be over the moon." Mary was right. When Hannah told him that evening, Zachary's face lit up with such pure joy that it brought tears to her eyes. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down again, worried he might hurt the baby. Sorry, he babbled. "I shouldn't have done that. Are you all right? Should you be resting? What do you need?" Hannah laughed through her tears. "I'm fine." "Pregnant women don't break, Zachary. We're actually quite sturdy." But he fussed over her anyway, insisting she rest more and work less, bringing her tea and crackers for the morning sickness, placing his hand on her still flat belly as if he could feel the baby growing inside her. His tenderness made Hannah fall in love with him all over again. The winter passed slowly, marked by Hannah's changing body and Zachary's increasing excitement. They spent long evenings discussing names and making plans for the nursery. Zachary built a cradle from oak wood, carving intricate patterns into the headboard. Hannah sewed tiny gowns and blankets, each stitch infused with love and hope. Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers and new calves. The ranch was busier than ever, and Zachary finally agreed to hire help. The young man from town, whose name was Thomas Wright, came to work for them 3 days a week, helping with the horses and general ranch work. He was quiet and hardworking, and Hannah was glad to see him treated with respect by Zachary. By May, Hannah's pregnancy was obvious to anyone who looked. She moved more slowly now, her belly round and heavy, but she refused to stop working entirely. She tended her garden, which had flourished under her care, and continued managing the household, though she accepted help with the heavier tasks. On a warm evening in late June, as she and Zachary sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk, Hannah felt the first contraction. It was subtle, just a tightening across her belly, but she had been expecting it. The baby was due any day now. "Zachary," she said calmly, "I think you should ride to town and fetch Mary Patterson." His eyes went wide. "Now, the baby's coming now, not immediately, but soon. These things take time. Go on, fetch Mary, and tell her to bring her husband if he's available." Zachary practically flew to the barn, saddled his horse in record time, and galloped toward town. Hannah went inside and began preparing, laying out the cloths and supplies they had set aside for this moment. The contractions were still far apart, giving her plenty of time between to work. Mary arrived within 2 hours, with Dr. Patterson following in his buggy. They took charge immediately, sending Zachary to boil water and gather more towels, keeping him busy so he wouldn't hover. Hannah was grateful for Mary's calm presence as the contractions intensified, the older woman's soothing voice talking her through each wave of pain. Labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. It was harder than Hannah had imagined, more painful, more exhausting. But every time she wanted to give up, she felt Zachary's hand gripping hers, heard his voice encouraging her, and found the strength to continue. As the sun rose on June 27, 1886, Hannah gave one final push and heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby's first cry. "It's a boy," Dr. Patterson announced, holding up a squirming, red-faced infant. "A healthy baby boy." Mary cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Hannah's arms. He was perfect. Tiny and red and absolutely perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn the same blue as his father's. Zachary knelt beside the bed, staring at his son with an expression of such awe that it made Hannah's heart ache. "He's real," he whispered. "He's actually real." "Of course he's real," Hannah said, laughing weakly. "What did you think he was, imaginary? I don't know. I couldn't quite believe it until now." Zachary reached out with one finger to touch the baby's tiny hand, and his son immediately gripped it with surprising strength. "Hello, little one. I'm your papa." They named him Henry Thomas Zimmerman, after Hannah's father and their hired hand who had become a trusted friend. Little Henry was a good baby, nursing well and sleeping in reasonable stretches. Zachary proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with Henry when he fussed, changing nappies without complaint, singing surprisingly good lullabies in his pleasant baritone. The summer passed in a blur of feedings and diaper changes, and sleep-deprived joy. Hannah had never been so exhausted or so happy. Watching Zachary with their son, seeing the gentle way he cradled the tiny body, the reverence with which he approached fatherhood, made her love him even more deeply. In August, they had Henry baptized at the church, with Mary Patterson and Thomas Wright standing as godparents. The whole town turned out for the ceremony, and afterward, at the ranch house reception, Hannah overheard several of the older women commenting on what a handsome family the Zimmermans made. "Who would have thought it would work out so well?" Mrs. Fletcher said to her companion. "A mail-order bride and a boy barely out of his teens. But look at them now, happy as can be." Hannah smiled to herself. Let them gossip. She knew the truth of her marriage, the love that had grown between her and Zachary, the family they were building together. Nothing else mattered. As autumn painted the hills in shades of gold and crimson, Hannah realized she had been in Arkansas for a year. 12 months since she had arrived on that stagecoach, terrified and desperate, carrying secrets and little hope. Now she stood in the ranch house doorway, holding her son while watching her husband work with the horses in the corral, and felt a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Zachary saw her watching and waved, his face breaking into that warm smile that still made her heart skip. He jogged over to the porch, taking the steps 2 at a time. "What's wrong?" he asked, seeing her tears. "Is Henry all right?" "Everything's fine," Hannah assured him. "Better than fine. I was just thinking about how much has changed in a year, how different my life is now." Zachary pulled her close, careful not to squish Henry between them. "Happy different, the happiest," Hannah confirmed. "I never imagined I could have this. A home, a family, a man who loves me. It feels like a dream sometimes." "It's real," Zachary said, echoing his words from the morning of Henry's birth. "This is real, Hannah. You and me and Henry, our family, our life, and it's only going to get better." The years proved him right. The ranch prospered under their joint management, growing from 200 head of cattle to over 500. Thomas Wright became their foreman, a trusted member of their extended ranch family. In 1888, Hannah gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Catherine, a beautiful baby with her mother's dark hair and her father's easy smile. 2 years later, another son arrived, James William, completing their family. The ranch house rang with children's laughter and the chaos of daily life. Zachary proved to be a wonderful father, patient and playful, teaching his children to ride and read with equal enthusiasm. Hannah became a pillar of the Benton community, known for her charity work and her willingness to stand up for those who couldn't defend themselves. She and Mary Patterson founded a school for children whose families couldn't afford the tuition at the main academy, ensuring that every child in the area had access to education, regardless of their circumstances. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary took Hannah back to the hilltop where they had ridden that first September, when she was still Miss Winters and the future was uncertain. The view was the same. The valley spread out below them in all its wild beauty, but everything else had changed. "Do you remember what I said that day in the wagon?" Zachary asked, his arm around her waist. "When you told me you were older than I expected, you said I was wiser than you hoped," Hannah replied, smiling at the memory. "I was right. You brought wisdom to this ranch, to my life. You made me a better man, Hannah, a better person. And you gave me a home when I had none," Hannah said, leaning into his embrace. "You saw past the age difference and the circumstances to the person I really was. You gave me love when I'd almost given up hope of finding it." They stood together as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Two people who had started as strangers brought together by necessity and built something beautiful through choice. Their children were playing in the ranch house below, supervised by Thomas and his wife Emma, another addition to their extended family. "I love you," Zachary said, as he did every day. "More now than I did 10 years ago, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today." "That's the secret, isn't it?" Hannah mused. "Love isn't something that happens all at once. It's something that grows day by day, choice by choice. We chose each other and we keep choosing each other every day." "Best choice I ever made," Zachary agreed. They rode back to the ranch house as twilight fell, to the home they had built and the family they had created. Henry, now 9 years old, came running to meet them, excited about something he wanted to show his father. Rose, at 7, was more reserved, but her face lit up when she saw her mother. 4-year-old James toddled after his siblings, determined not to be left behind. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Hannah and Zachary sat on the porch as they had so many times before. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the air was sweet with the scent of honeysuckle. "Tell me again," Zachary said, a familiar request, "about the day you arrived, what you were thinking." I was terrified, Hannah admitted. I thought I had made a terrible mistake. A young rancher who probably wanted a young bride, and here I was, nearly 30, with nothing to offer but desperation and hope. And I thought I was getting a young girl who would need teaching and molding. Zachary continued the familiar story. Instead, I got a woman who already knew her own mind, who challenged me and pushed me and made me think about things I'd taken for granted. We were both wrong about what we needed, Hannah said softly, and both right about what we found, Zachary finished. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. I wouldn't change a thing, not a single day, not a single moment, even the hard times, the struggles, they all led us here. To this porch in this moment, with our children sleeping upstairs and our whole lives ahead of us, Hannah agreed. No, I wouldn't change a thing either. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, content in the life they had built together. Two people separated by age and experience, brought together by circumstance and bound by love. The mail-order bride and the young rancher who had looked past expectations to find something real and lasting. Years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Henry grew tall and strong, inheriting his father's way with cattle and his mother's sharp mind. At 18, he announced his intention to study agriculture at the new state university, a plan both his parents fully supported despite the expense. Rose showed a talent for healing and began apprenticing with Dr. Patterson when she turned 15, learning medicine with the same dedication her mother had once applied to sewing. Young James proved to have his father's easy charm and his mother's stubborn determination, a combination that would serve him well as he grew into manhood. The ranch continued to thrive, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. Zachary's reputation for fair dealing and quality livestock spread far beyond Benton, and buyers came from as far as Little Rock and Memphis to purchase Zimmerman cattle. Hannah's careful management of the household finances and her insistence on reinvesting profits wisely ensured the ranch's continued prosperity even in difficult years. In 1896, on a crisp October morning, Hannah woke to find silver in her hair and laughter lines deep around her eyes. She was 44 years old, mother of 3 nearly grown children, wife of 22 years, and completely content with the life she had built. She rose and dressed, then went downstairs to find Zachary already in the kitchen, coffee brewing and breakfast started. "Morning, beautiful," he said, kissing her cheek as she entered. He was 33 now, though he looked older with the weathering of years spent outdoors. His sandy hair had darkened and bore a few threads of gray at the temples. He was still lean and strong, but there was a solidity to him now, a groundedness that came with maturity. "You're cooking," Hannah smiled, pouring herself coffee. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion. Just wanted to do something nice for my wife." He flipped eggs in the pan with practiced ease. "The kids are all still sleeping. Thought we could have a quiet breakfast, just the two of us." They ate together at the kitchen table, talking about the day's work and making plans for the coming winter. These quiet morning moments had become precious to both of them, stolen time before the busyness of ranch life took over. "I was thinking," Zachary said, setting down his fork. "Maybe this winter, after the harvest is in and things slow down, we could take a trip. Just the two of us. Go to Little Rock, stay in a nice hotel, see some shows, have an adventure." Hannah looked at him in surprise. In 22 years of marriage, they had rarely left the ranch for more than a day or two at a time. "What about the children? The ranch?" "Henry's old enough to manage things for a week, and Thomas will help. The kids will be fine." Zachary reached across the table to take her hand. "I want to do something special for you, Hannah. Show you some of the world beyond this ranch." You've spent more than 2 decades making this place a home, raising our children, supporting me. You deserve some time to be pampered and spoiled." Tears pricked Hannah's eyes. Even after all these years, Zachary could still surprise her with his thoughtfulness. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I'd like that very much." They made the trip in December, traveling by train to Little Rock and staying in the finest hotel in the city. For one glorious week, they were just Hannah and Zachary, not parents or ranchers or responsible members of the community. They attended theater performances and dined in restaurants with white tablecloths. They walked along the Arkansas River and explored shops filled with goods from around the world. They made love in their hotel room with the freedom of knowing no children might interrupt, rediscovering each other with the passion of newlyweds. On their last night in the city, as they prepared for bed, Hannah caught Zachary watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What is it?" she asked. "I was just thinking about that day you arrived. How young and nervous I was, how certain I was that I'd made a mistake placing that advertisement. And then you stepped off that stagecoach, and you were nothing like I expected." "Older than you expected," Hannah said, smiling at their familiar story. "Wiser than I hoped," Zachary completed. He crossed the room to her, taking both her hands in his. "I was 23 years old and so sure I knew what I needed. A young wife who would follow my lead and help me build my ranch. But I didn't need that at all. No, I needed a partner, an equal, someone who would challenge me and stand beside me and make me better than I ever could have been alone. I needed you, Hannah, exactly as you were. And I need you still, exactly as you are now." Hannah felt tears spill over, tracking down her cheeks. "I love you, Zachary Zimmerman. I've loved you for so long I can barely remember what it was like not to love you." "Then let's never remember," Zachary said, pulling her close. "Let's just keep loving each other every day, for whatever time we have left." They returned to the ranch renewed and refreshed, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. And there were challenges. A drought in 1898 that tested their reserves and their resolve. A bout of illness in 1900 that swept through the county, sparing their family but claiming several neighbors. The slow, inevitable march of progress that brought the 20th century with all its changes and complications. But through it all, Hannah and Zachary faced each obstacle together, their partnership strengthened by decades of trust and love. Henry graduated from university and returned to the ranch, bringing with him modern ideas about breeding and land management that complemented his father's experience. Rose completed her medical training and opened a practice in Benton, the first female doctor in the county. James, wild and adventurous, went west to Colorado to work on the railroads, sending long letters home filled with descriptions of mountains and adventures. In 1904, on their 30th wedding anniversary, the Zimmerman family gathered at the ranch house for a celebration. Henry brought his new wife Sarah, a schoolteacher from Little Rock. Rose came with her medical bag, having been called to a birth that morning. James arrived from Colorado with stories and gifts, delighting his parents with his enthusiasm for his work. Mary Patterson, now elderly but still sharp as ever, attended with her husband and grown children. Thomas Wright and his wife Emma came with their 4 children, all of whom had grown up on the Zimmerman ranch. Other neighbors and friends filled the house and yard, celebrating 3 decades of marriage that had started with such uncertainty and grown into something beautiful. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Hannah found a quiet moment to stand on the porch and survey the scene. Her children, grown and making their own ways in the world. Her husband, still handsome and vital at 43. The ranch they had built together, thriving and prosperous. the community they were part of, woven together through years of shared joys and sorrows. Zachary joined her, slipping his arm around her waist in the familiar gesture that still made her heart flutter. "Happy, impossibly happy," Hannah confirmed. "I keep thinking about that terrified woman who stepped off the stage coach 30 years ago. If I could go back and tell her how things would turn out, I don't think she'd believe me." "Probably not," Zachary agreed, "but she was brave enough to take the chance anyway. To risk everything on the possibility of something better." "We both were," Hannah pointed out. "You took a chance on me too, on an older bride with no experience of ranch life. Best risk I ever took." Zachary turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "You know what I remember most about that first day? Not your age, not your appearance, but the intelligence in your eyes. The courage it took to admit the truth right away instead of trying to hide it. I saw strength in you that day, Hannah. The kind of strength I knew I wanted in a partner." "And I saw kindness in you," Hannah replied. "Wisdom beyond your years, the ability to see past surface details to what really mattered. I knew then that I could build a life with you if you'd have me." "If I'd have you," Zachary laughed, as if there was ever any question. "From that moment in the wagon when you said you were older than I expected, and I realized it didn't matter one bit. I knew you were meant to be mine." They stood together as the last of the guests departed, as the sun set over the ranch they had built, as their children moved through the house with the easy comfort of people who knew they were home. 30 years of marriage, 3 children, countless challenges overcome, and their love was stronger than ever. In the years that followed, Hannah and Zachary settled into the comfortable rhythm of middle age. They worked the ranch with Henry, teaching him everything they had learned over 3 decades. They visited Rose in town, proud of the doctor she had become. They received letters from James, chronicling his adventures in the West. In 1908, Henry and Sarah presented them with their first grandchild, a baby girl named Catherine after Hannah's middle name. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Hannah was transported back to the day Henry was born, the terror and joy of that long labor, the miracle of new life. "She has your eyes," Zachary said softly, looking over Hannah's shoulder at the sleeping infant. "And Henry's nose," Hannah replied, smiling. "Poor thing." They became doting grandparents, much to Henry and Sarah's amusement. 2 more grandchildren followed over the next few years, a boy and another girl, filling the ranch house once again with the sounds of children's laughter. In 1912, Hannah turned 60 years old. Zachary, at 52, threw her a surprise party that brought tears to her eyes. All their children came home for the occasion, even James from Colorado. Friends from all over the county attended, bearing gifts and good wishes. As Hannah looked around at the faces of people she loved, people whose lives had intertwined with hers over 40 years in Arkansas, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She had come to this place broken and desperate, carrying nothing but hope and determination. She had found love, built a family, created a home. She had lived a life beyond anything she could have imagined in those dark days after her father's death. That night, lying in bed beside Zachary, Hannah said, "Thank you." "For what?" Zachary asked, turning to face her. "For everything. For seeing past my age and my circumstances to the person I was. For building this life with me. For loving me through all these years. Hannah Zimmerman, I have loved you from the moment you told me you were older than I expected. I will love you until my last breath leaves my body. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They held each other close, 2 people who had grown old together, who had faced joys and sorrows side by side, who had built something lasting from the most unlikely of beginnings. The years continued their steady march. The world changed around them. Automobiles appeared on the roads of Benton. The Great War came and went, taking some of their neighbors' sons but sparing their own children. Technology advanced, bringing new tools and methods to ranching. Through it all, Hannah and Zachary remained constant. Their love, forged in the uncertainty of a mail-order marriage, had proven stronger than time or circumstance. They grew old together with grace and gratitude, cherishing each day as the gift it was. In 1924, on their 50th wedding anniversary, the Zimmerman family gathered once more at the ranch. Hannah was 72 now, her hair completely silver, her face lined with the marks of a life well lived. Zachary, at 62, moved a bit slower than he once had, but his eyes still sparkled with the same warmth that had captured Hannah's heart so long ago. Their 3 children were there, grown and successful in their own lives. 7 grandchildren ran through the house and yard, with 2 more on the way. Friends and neighbors filled the space to bursting, celebrating 5 decades of marriage. The local newspaper sent a reporter to interview them, fascinated by the story of the mail-order bride and the young rancher who had built such an enduring partnership. "What's the secret?" the reporter asked, pencil poised over his notebook. "How have you made it work for 50 years? Hannah and Zachary looked at each other, a lifetime of shared understanding passing between them in that glance. "We chose each other," Hannah said simply, "and we kept choosing each other every day no matter what. We built something together," Zachary added. "Not just a ranch or a family, but a partnership based on respect and trust and love. We didn't always agree, didn't always have easy times, but we faced everything together. And we never stopped talking," Hannah continued. "We told each other the truth, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard." The reporter scribbled notes, then looked up with a smile. "It's a beautiful story, the kind that gives people hope." After he left, after the party wound down and the guests departed, after their children and grandchildren had gone to bed, Hannah and Zachary found themselves once more on the porch where they had spent so many evenings over the years. 50 years, Hannah marveled. "Half a century since that day I stepped off the stagecoach, terrified and desperate." 50 years since the best day of my life," Zachary corrected. "The day you came home to me, even though you didn't know it yet." "I knew," Hannah said softly. "Deep down, I knew. From the moment you smiled at me and said I was wiser than you hoped, I knew this was where I belonged." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The same stars that had shone on that first evening 50 years ago, when they were strangers beginning an uncertain journey together. "You have any regrets?" Zachary asked quietly. Hannah thought about her life, about all the roads not taken, the choices made and unmade. She thought about the woman she had been in Boston, lonely and afraid. She thought about the woman she had become in Arkansas, loved and cherished and strong. "Not a single one," she said firmly. "You?" "Only that I didn't place that advertisement sooner," Zachary replied with a smile. "Think of all the extra years we could have had together." Hannah laughed, the sound warm and rich in the evening air. "We've had 50 years, Zachary Zimmerman. 50 beautiful, wonderful, occasionally challenging, always interesting years. That's more than most people get." "Then I'm the luckiest man alive," Zachary said, raising her hand to his lips. "To have had 50 years with you, Hannah Catherine Zimmerman, is more than I ever deserved." "We deserved each other," Hannah corrected gently. "Two people brave enough to take a chance, honest enough to speak the truth, and wise enough to recognize love when it found us." They remained on the porch until the stars filled the entire sky, a canopy of light stretching from horizon to horizon. Inside the house, their family slept, the product of their love and their commitment. The ranch stretched around them, testament to decades of hard work and careful stewardship. As they finally rose to go inside, to climb the stairs to the bedroom they had shared for half a century, Zachary pulled Hannah close one more time. "I love you," he whispered into her silver hair. "Today, tomorrow, and for whatever time we have left. You are my heart, Hannah. You always have been." "And you are mine," Hannah replied, her voice thick with emotion. "My partner, my love, my home. Thank you for seeing past the age and the circumstances to the woman underneath. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for being brave enough to step off that stagecoach," Zachary countered. "For being honest about who you were, for building this life with me." They climbed the stairs together, leaning on each other as they had learned to do over 50 years of marriage. Behind them, the house settled into peaceful silence, filled with the ghosts of laughter and love, witness to half a century of a marriage that began with the simplest of truths. "I'm older than you expected," and the simplest of responses. "Then you're wiser than I hoped." Words that had changed two lives, built a family, created a legacy that would endure for generations to come. A mail-order bride and a young rancher, brought together by circumstance, bound by love, proof that the best relationships are built not on expectations met, but on truth told and accepted. Their story became legend in Benton, told and retold as an example of what marriage could be when two people chose partnership over perfection, honesty over pretense, love over convenience. And in the hearts of their children and grandchildren, the memory of their love lived on, a testament to the power of courage, honesty, and choosing each other every single day.